Welcome. My name is Peter Horton, and I'm the Global Channel Marketing Manager for Impinj. And on behalf of all of us at Impinj and Miles Technologies, we truly appreciate your taking the time out of your schedules to be here on the call with us. Now, joining me today is Tracy Hillstrom, also from Impinj. She's our Senior Product Line Manager, responsible for the Speedway Reader and Antenna product portfolio. And Tracy's going to kick things off with a quick introduction of Impinj for those of you who are not familiar with us, and then at a very high level discuss the trends of asset tracking and the benefits of using RFID to accomplish it. And also joining us is Tom O'Boyle, Corporate Vice President of Miles Technologies. And Tom's really the reason we're all here on the call today. Tom and his team at Miles Technologies are experts when it comes to using passive RFID to track assets. And today he's going to share some of that expertise by discussing some of the core best practices with us. Now, before I hand the controls over to Tracy, I just wanted to let you know that today's presentation should take about 25 minutes, leaving us with about 5 minutes at the end to answer any questions you may have. All right, Tracy.
Thanks, Peter. And thanks to all of you who have taken time out of your busy day to join us today. As Peter mentioned, I'm just going to do a bit of an introduction and a level setting on passive RFID in asset tracking and leave most of the time for the star of the show, Tom O'Boyle from Miles Technology. He's really going to be presenting some great information on how to get started with a passive tagging application in asset tracking. I wanted to start just by giving an introduction to Impinj. Many of you may not be familiar with Impinj, and the reason is that we're largely a technology provider. We are a leading provider, the leading provider of UHF RFID technology in the market, and we provide the technology through 3 product lines. We have a product line called our Monza product line for tag chips, and these are the tags that go into the RFID inlays. We also have a tag line called our Indy product line that has RFID reader chips. And these are small readers that can be embedded into other products in order to create reading capabilities. And we have the Speedway product line. And this is a line of RFID readers and antennas that are marketed under our own brand. Between these 3 products, we bring a unique value proposition to customers looking to deploy UHF-based RFID, in that we're able to design unique capabilities into both the reader and chip chip products to bring differentiation and enhanced performance to the RFID products. This enables many industries, including retail, pharmaceutical, food and beverage, consumer electronics, manufacturing, logistics, hospital and healthcare, and enables us to bring this technology to those customers. Now, we bring this technology to customers through partners, and here you'll see a listing of a number of end users that deploy with Impinj-based technology. But the way we go to market is we go hand in hand with our partners. They lead the effort with these end users, and they bring the technology and wrap around it a unique solution to fit these specific customers' needs. And that's why we're so excited to have Miles Technologies and Tom O'Boyle today. He's going to explain the unique capabilities that he can bring in asset tagging applications. I wanted to take a moment to just level set and talk about some of the trends in asset tagging and passive RFID. And just to talk about the reasons that you may be here. So the first question I'm going to ask is, why are you here? And if you're like most that I have talked to, customers I have talked to, you probably have a large facility. It may be an industrial facility, it may be a healthcare campus, or other large campus type environments or large buildings. In addition to having the large facility, you probably have mobile assets. And they may be mobile assets like tools, like you'll see here, or large mobile assets like trailers and trucks. You have high value assets, and this is value either in terms of cost, such as electronic equipment and computing equipment, or in time value. In some cases, the item itself that you're looking to track and trace is not of high value, but if it's missing for a period of time, it can cost the company quite a bit. And ultimately, the problem is that you can't find them when you need them. And it's a problem inside many industries that they're looking to solve. And so you got to ask yourself, you've been putting time and effort into creating practices and processes to be able to trace and track these items more effectively. And why is that not working? Ultimately, it's because you're working with folks like these. Here we go. There's one gentleman you might be working with, or these couple of ladies. And ultimately, no matter what process or practice that we create, it is inherent with a bit of failure, and because it relies on human beings who tend to be error-prone. And so what we want to do is look at practices that take the human equation out of the scenario. You're not alone in looking to do that. There are many, many companies out there that are looking for a fully automated solution that operates without human intervention. And for the most part, they're looking today at passive UHF RFID technology to help accomplish that. And I have some information provided here by Venture Data Corporation Research. They're an industry analyst that looks at this market space and talks with many end users across this market about their needs and requirements as well as vendors. And so they're a good benchmark for what's happening in the industry. I've talked to Mike Liard recently, who is an industry analyst, about asset tagging and how he sees that market. And you'll see over to the right, I have a pie chart that is specifically some information on market, on the asset tag tracking with RFID technology. And you'll see each pie chart there is a different technology. The largest one is passive UHF. In some cases, I think the technology that it's replacing is high-frequency technology, where you see more and more people moving off that technology. In some cases, it will always be around, but moving towards passive UHF, and we'll talk about why in a minute. It's also a large growth segment. So you'll see a 25% compound annual growth rate over about a 5-year period in passive UHF RFID. Significant growth. This is all these people coming together trying to solve this common problem of how they track and trace and find these items when they need them and avoid the human error that can be associated with today's processes. So Michael said, you know, in looking at asset tagging, he said outside of retail apparel, item level tagging, asset management is the largest application for passive UHF systems, and it's a center for future growth across all industries and verticals. And so, again, you're not alone. There's a lot of people looking to deploy RFID in this area. Now, just to level set, why is that? Why do people look at RFID? And let's just talk at a base to get people up to speed on what is RFID. RFID starts with a little bit of silicon, and if you look in that picture, you see this tiniest little speck of black on that finger. That is a piece of silicon that may be embedded into an RFID tag. That piece of silicon carries information. It can carry a lot of information, in fact. And so you take that piece of silicon and you put it onto an antenna. And what you have is the ability to now carry information on an item and follow it throughout a process and gather information. So here's a reader and antenna combination. What happens in RFID once you put it on an antenna and you put that antenna on an item? The reader can read the information, new information can be written to that item, and you're able to carry a portable data file with that item throughout the system. Overall, this creates a system of its own, and it's something we often refer to as the Internet of Things. It's a system whereby items can speak for themselves. They can carry information about when they've been built or what materials were used to build them, whether they've been purchased or not. They can carry information about what specifically item they are and who they belong to. All of this information can be collected automatically without human intervention and entered into existing IT infrastructure and existing IT systems to create better opportunities for information gathering and business intelligence. So ultimately, the RFID advantage, and the reason that most companies are looking at it, is that it's a margin-enhancing technology. Not only are you able to support portable data and automation and drive gains in accuracy and efficiency, which helps your bottom line, but you gain this business intelligence that can help drive top line. You can create new revenue opportunities and provide new customer experiences with the information that's available through this system. To make that happen, however, you've got to look at how you implement RFID. And today I would describe RFID as something akin to this big soundboard you see right here. It's got an infinite amount of capabilities and tools at your disposal. And all these knobs and buttons are things that you can push to allow it to be optimized for individual scenarios and situations and use cases and different types of items you're tracking and different types of processes. And they all do a very fine job of it. But the reality is, the type of sound you get and how it's optimized for the environment it's in depends on the person sitting behind the board and how skilled they are. And that's the way that passive UHF RFID today. If I can encourage one thing from you as you consider your path forward with passive UHF RFID and asset tracking, is that you get a skilled practitioner of RFID involved in your implementation practice. And you've got one following me up right here in Tom O'Boyle and Miles Technology that is a great person to access and talk to. And so with that, I will turn things over to Tom O'Boyle from Miles, our long-term partner and friend, and he can talk a little bit about asset tracking and where it's going, how to make that optimized in your scenario.
All right, Tom, you should have control over the slide deck now.
Great, thanks, Tracy, and thanks, Pierre. I'm going to see if I can get control here. Okay, so let's kind of get started here. Just before I get into my topic of discussion today, I wanted to give everyone on the call a little bit of background about Miles Technologies and our RFID experience. So we have been implementing RFID for quite a while. Our first RFID implementation was in 1999. And what that really did is that opened our eyes to the benefits of RFID technology. The ability to automatically capture data without human intervention was truly revolutionary, especially at that time. So we made a concerted effort in investment in our company to go out and start working with the leading RFID manufacturers to get certified on all their equipment and learn as much as we could. And what that really led us to is some experiences that now we see really starting to transform our systems that we implement for our customers. So we've really had our expertise really focused on a couple of areas. One of them is real-time location systems using passive long-range UHF RFID tagging options. So that technology really allows us to do asset tracking down to room-level visibility. And one of the slides that Tracy showed was a movement from potentially HF short-range passive RFID tagging to more UHF, which is long-range RFID asset tracking. And that really bodes well for the real-time location systems, because what that's allowing us to do is provide room-level accuracy. And we just show a few logos here of some of our existing customers. Most of the companies we show here are really large, but we have large companies and small companies. The smallest of companies may have the same base problem that a large company has. It just may not be quite as extensive as far as size of facility or number of read zones. So let's get into the meat of our discussion today, which really is about best practices and some of the things you need to tackle in order to make sure that your asset tracking project is very successful. And so here's some of the key points we're going to discuss. One of them is to make sure that we're selecting the right technology and the right tag for your use case. So there are some questions we're going to ask, which is related to what we call resolution or location resolution that's really important to determine what's the best technology for you to use. Number two will be, we're going to talk about linking your asset with an RFID tag. That practice has to happen in order for you to be able to track everything in your system. So we're going to talk about what are the best ways to do that. Number three, we're going to hit read zones and making sure that the read zones you set up will actually be appropriate for your use cases, because everyone's always slightly different, and that goes back to the soundboard analogy that Tracy was using. And we want to make sure that we're not missing out on some opportunities. And one of the opportunities is to make sure that we have the ability to do a physical count once we set up the system. So not only will be able to automatically track things in the background while they're moving, but we can also come in and do a physical audit or a count with a handheld if needed. And ultimately, it's about your data. Your data is really going to drive the decisions. And those decisions is really how you're determining whether you have the proper return on your investment for the system. So let's talk about some of the main system considerations. Number one is, what are we trying to track? What type of assets are we looking at? Are we looking at small little hand tools? Are we looking at IT assets like PCs and servers and monitors and any other type of IT asset? iPads is another example we hear quite often. They are mobile devices. Or are we looking at tracking test equipment or something large that maybe even goes into a case? And so all of these need to be considered. Your tool, as we see here on the left-hand side, that particular tool is a small little hand tool. Well, the small little hand tool, of course, is going to end up with a small tag. And so that small tag may have a different read zone associated with it as we're trying to track whether it's on a bench or not. So now that we understand a little bit about the assets we're trying to tag, so now let's talk about the resolution that we're interested in gathering. So location, accuracy, and resolution really determines your technology and your costs associated with the system. There are two basic types of tags out there. The first basic type of tag is an active tag. And active tags can give you the possibility of getting what we call an XY coordinate, or really it's a mapping of the asset, like a GPS system for your asset throughout your facility. The great part about that is you can get an XY coordinate to be accurate within a couple feet, maybe 2 to 10 feet. But in order to implement that, that means we have to have an active tag. And an active tag is a tag with a battery on it, which means it transmits continuously. It might transmit once a second, or maybe it might transmit 30 times per second. But that tag really allows us to get an XY coordinate. But there are costs associated with getting that special XY coordinate. So not only are we trying to look for it, whether it's in the room, but we're trying to look for where in the room it is within a couple feet. So if that's your use case, then active tags may be an option for you. But if your use case really is associated with trying to understand which room it's in or which shelf it is in, then passive might fit, because passive cannot give you that XY coordinate necessarily, but it can tell you which room it's in, and you can take the next step, which is usually with a handheld, to really hone in and get yourself within a couple feet of that particular asset. So what we have a tendency to see in the industry is that most customers really are choosing passive long-range RFID technology as the best balance between the location information that they're looking for and the costs associated with the system. So let's dive a little deeper into passive location tracking systems. So a couple key things about passive tags. Number one is it's passive because it does not have a battery. So passive RFID tags have a chip and an antenna like Tracy was showing. Those chips and antennas really get turned on essentially by the reader and the reader's antenna. So that reader's energy, as the tag enters into the read zone, turns the chip on and has the chip essentially reflect that energy back with its RFID data encoded inside that energy. So what that really means is that depending upon the tag and its location in proximity to the reader's antennas, well, our read range is going to vary. So our read range will vary greatly depending upon tag size, antennas, power levels of the read zone. But typical is about 8 feet. Now, you'll see specifications for tags that'll show read ranges from a couple feet up to over 50 feet. The reality is that our read zones typically are turned down enough to make sure that we're reading everything we want to read, but not reading the things that we don't care about. So your typical read range is about 8 feet for passive RFID tags. And passive RFID location systems are really last seen technology. So if I put a read zone at the doorway on the east side of a building, and I put a read zone at the doorway on the west side of the building, as my tag enters the east side, our system will tell us that it's in the east side. Until that tag passes all the way over to the west side, it will not show that we're in the west side. So if it is a lasting technology, the system is going to report the last time the tag was seen in a read zone. So let's talk about the different tags and types that are out there. Here are some of the variables that you have to consider as you're looking at passive RFID tags for your assets. Number one will be the size and location of the tag is going to be key to its readability. So if I can put the tag on the front of a piece of test equipment, it is going to be easier to read than it on the back of the piece of test equipment, depending upon the read zone. So realistically, the largest tag that I would like to use may not fit on that front of the piece of test gear. So what do we need to do? We need to actually manage the size of the tag in the best spot that we can possibly put it to get the best read we can get. So one of the key parameters, the smaller the tag, the smaller the read zone. So we can get these really small tags that are the size of a paperclip. But those tags are not going to read very, very far at all. In fact, they're only going to read usually less than a foot. Or I can get tags that are 6 inches by 8 inches, which is a very large tag, and that tag can read up to 50 feet. The balance is to figure out which tag can I fit on my asset to give me my best read range, yet allow my asset to not get encumbered by the tag itself. Another key component will be whether my asset is metal-based or not. If my asset is metal-based, I must use a metal mount or a metal-based type tag. Those metal mount tags work extremely well when they're attached to metal-based products. And what that really does for us is it allows us to read at that 8 to 10 foot read range that we're wanting to read. If you use a non-metal based tag onto a metal-based object, what you will find is that read range will go from 8 to 10 feet down to 8 to 10 inches. It is significant drop-off. Another variable for tags that you need to consider is really your attachment options. We can attach by adhesive or by mechanical means like nuts and bolts, or we can attach by welding the tag or even embedding the tag inside another product. So we have options there, but all those options need to be considered when you're looking for RFID passive tags. Once we've decided on the type of tags we need to now perform a process which is linking the asset to the RFID tag value. Now we prefer here to use pre-encoded RFID tags. And the reason is simple. A pre-encoded RFID tag has a pre-written value in the tag. Because if we can use a pre-encoded RFID tag, we don't have to write a new value to the tag out in the field. Writing is definitely a possibility, but it can be a danger as well. If the users don't operate it correctly, they could literally write a new value to a tag that they did not want to write a new value to. So we end up with a couple of tags with the same number on it, and that can be very dangerous. So we prefer to take that variable out of a system and use pre-encoded tags and simply link using barcode or RFID technologies the value that's in that tag to the asset itself. One other piece, one other key element that happens during this process is we have to find all of our assets in order to tag them. What that does is that forces a real inventory for our customers. That real inventory cleans up the RFID asset list substantially, because now we're not trying to chase assets that have been removed from the system years ago. So here's a simple screen, just shows some of the capability. So if we're trying to actually read and link an RFID tag to an asset, it's as simple as typing in the asset number and literally just scanning or RFID reading the RFID value into the system and hit save. So the process for linking an RFID tag to an asset is literally seconds. The process is exaggerated significantly when you have to go find the asset in the first place. So as we look at our system, if we've got tags identified and we're linking those tags to assets, now we need to make sure we're setting up our read zones. And our read zones we can have systems that have only a few read zones. We can have systems that have hundreds of read zones. The rules are really the same. So what we really want to do is talk about some of the best things you can do for yourself. One of them is spacing. The farther we have a read zone spaced away from each other, the easier it is for the system to determine where the tag is located. So if we have a read zone very, very close, we need more software to do some filtering to make sure that we're determining that the tag is in zone A versus in zone B. Your size of your zone is also going to determine how many antennas you need. And how many antennas you need can be a driving factor on how many readers you need. So as an example, a dock door may need anywhere from 2 antennas up to 8 antennas to cover the dock door appropriately for the tagged assets that are going through there. You contrast that with an office door, which may be just a single width door that we might be able to get away with 1 or 2 antennas. But if I'm trying to determine direction of travel in that read zone, then I need to make sure that I have antennas on both sides of the door. So if I'm trying to determine that a tag is going into a room, I have to have antennas on the outside of the room and antennas on the inside of the room so that software-wise we can determine the direction of travel. The other key element is to take a look at your aesthetics around your read zone. Can the antennas be exposed or not? Can the antennas be top-mounted in the ceiling shooting downward? Can the antennas be side-mounted? Some of those decisions are going to be based upon the tags you have chosen for your assets. If you've chose very small tags, more than most likely you're not going to be able to use antennas that are mounted on the ceiling because the distance starts to expand between the reader's antenna and the tag itself. So there are some options for putting antennas on the top part or near the ceiling, on the side, or even on the floor. We've got some floor options available to us as well. So here's kind of an example of a tight read zone in a warehouse. You can see we're trying to actually track the assets as they go down individual aisleways. Those aisleways are actually very tightly controlled, but they are very tight read zones as well. So there's only about 8 feet from one aisleway to the next aisleway. That's a pretty tight read zone. And we're able to do that, but you need to use some significant software power in order to really differentiate a read that's happening between any of the aisles. But you contrast that with an office or a hospital environment where we can actually set up read zones like this. So as you can see, we've got floor-mounted antennas and read zones that can be set up. We've got antennas that can literally be mounted on door frames, or in some cases, there's antennas that you want to mount right on the walls. So depending upon your aesthetics, depending upon whether the antenna can be exposed, depending upon the assets will determine where you're going to really mount those antennas and which antennas you decide to use. One of the last points we want to really make sure that we talk about when it comes to the systems is really if I've tagged and I've got this fixed read zones that are automatically tracking my assets as they go inside of rooms, we may want to find an asset that's deeper in the room itself. So that room may be 10,000 square feet. So what we'll do is we'll actually take a handheld and enter in the asset number in a piece of software and then start pulling the trigger on the handheld, which starts the reader process. What we're able to do is we're able to literally see tags being read. And if my asset tag is being seen, it starts beeping. The closer I get, the more it beeps. This screen literally also will dictate whether you're close or far away. This way we can hone in on an asset and literally get within a couple feet. That same handheld can really perform a counting function for a location for audit purposes. So here's an example of a user literally starting to do some physical inventories out on a warehouse floor. That same process happens with typical assets in an office. The difference is for RFID that what we're looking at in your physical inventory handheld screen would be we need to give some direction to a user. Why? Because the benefit of RFID is I can pull the trigger and read hundreds and hundreds of tags. Unfortunately, we're not exactly sure which ones we read unless we look at the screen. So this screen really drives the user to let them know that you should be expecting 5 assets in this office, and as soon as I see the assets, the found number increases, the missing number decreases, and to the point that I finally find all the assets I'm looking for. And remember, it's really all about the data. Your data is really your lifeblood. It's really your decision-making criteria for your ROI. So a couple things to keep in mind. Number one is import as many of your asset details as you can. It's okay to hand enter data into any system, but the more you hand enter data, the more problems we're going to have, the more errors we're going to get. Make sure that your system queries and lookups are really simple. So if you just want to find out what assets are in a room, you should be able to just find that room, click on the search button, and see all the assets that are in that room. It should be pretty simple. And keep in mind, and here's one of the great benefits of RFID asset tracking, is every movement is a transaction. So now we have an audit trail and a history of each asset and where it has been and how long it stayed there. And all of that data is available to be exported into an ERP system. So we can now send that data into whatever system is necessary, or you can use it in a standalone fashion. But really, that data is what drives your decisions on your ROI of your system. So just kind of in summary, make sure that you're selecting the right technology and tagging system for your use case, making that decision on whether you really need that XY coordinate or if room level or shelf level is good enough accuracy for the cost associated with it. Make sure that you understand you have to link your RFID tag to your asset, which usually means going out and finding those assets to put the tags on. We're going to set up your use case, your read zones for your use cases, whether it's dock doors or offices or secure rooms or conveyor belts. All of them have a different read zone, same readers, maybe slightly different antennas, all have to get dialed in appropriately. And make sure you leave room to be able to use handhelds to do your counting and your locate functions. And really, gathering your data is the key. Making sure that you can send that data into any ERP system that you want to send it to so your decisions can be made appropriately. So with that, I am going to turn it over to Peter. And Peter, I'll let you take it from there.
All right, thanks, Tom. So I've got a couple questions here. Are there certain environments where I cannot deploy an asset tracking solution?
We have not been able to kind of find that environment. We've been able to deploy RFID asset tracking in high temperature, in outdoor weather. We've been able to also deploy it in high RF environments where we have lots of radio signals as well. So, so far we've been successful in being able to deploy in the areas that customers have asked.
Excellent. Another question here for you. What is, or do you have experience interfacing the collecting synchronously with SAP on a per transaction basis?
We've been able to send data out to various different systems. SAP in a synchronous mode has not been one that we've had to tackle, but we have been able to send asynchronous data out through a terminal services session.
What software do you recommend for a passive RFID asset tracking solution, and does Miles Technologies have such a solution?
The answer is yes, we do have a solution. We've got our own software that we've deployed in various different areas, but we've also deployed other software applications. It really depends upon the use case in itself. Are we trying to do WIP tracking or asset tracking or inventory control? And in what features and really screens, if any, that we have to deploy to the customer will depend upon whether we use our own internal software or somebody else's.
Great. Another question. What mobile terminals do you use for your solution?
We have used a couple. We have used Motorola handhelds, and we've also used Intermec handhelds and Scion handhelds. So those are the three main manufacturers. Mostly we look for Windows-based handheld solutions, and as long as they've got a RFID, what's called an SDK, which is our development environment, we're able to deploy our solution across those handhelds.
Great. Got a question for Tracy here. Can the direction of travel be achieved by the reader intelligence instead of having an antenna on both sides of the door?
Yeah, I would say that the most robust solution for determining direction of travel is going to be with antennas on both sides of the door, and again, creating this discrete read zones on either side that you can use. There are some abilities to gather what we call low-level data that can be used to sometimes generate a tag direction algorithm that sits off the reader. But those, whether or not that works in the environment that you have is just something that would need to be determined by trial and error. So there are some things to look at, I guess I would answer by saying. I think the standard approach that people use today for direction of travel is still with the antennas on both sides of the doors. But I think you'll see more and more coming in terms of options we have to help make that determination using reader intelligence.
Great. Thanks, Tracy. Let's see. Got a couple more questions here. What kinds of inlay RFID tags do you recommend for asset tracking?
Well, inlays are typically used for labels. Assets have a tendency not to be tagged using labels unless they're plastic or some form of poly material. So what we see is hardened RFID tags being used for lots of assets. Why? Because they're a combination of metal and plastic together. So hardened RFID tags have a tendency to be not inlay-based, but really the chip and the antenna structure that's supporting the chip is tackled by that hardened RFID manufacturer. So common companies would be companies like Xerify or OmniID, who make hardened tags, specialty tags, depending upon the type of asset you're trying to tag.
Great. Thank you. I have another question actually from that same individual that asked the last one, and this one's for Tracy, asking about the GPIO.
Yeah, so the question is about, in terms of determining direction, can you use the GPIO? I think what the questioner is asking is whether or not you're able to use other types of sensors to help make the determination for direction rather than the passive RFID reads itself. And the answer is yes. If you wanted to set up sensors on either side of a door and have that marry and contribute to the tag read in terms of determining direction in your database and in software, that's absolutely a way to contribute to the direction determination.
Got a question here for Tom. Can you do a 100% physical inventory in a warehouse with the flip of a switch?
None that I've seen so far. The reality is, using passive RFID tagging options, it would take a substantial number of readers and antennas to try and light up, as we call it, every single nook and cranny of a warehouse in order to determine what's in there. So the opportunity really is to do the best job you can to try and figure out which zone something is in, and then use handheld to go do your physical inventory in those particular zones. We've seen where we're trying to get more and more where the tags themselves can really get lit up by different methodologies, but right now, current technology today, we're looking at trying to have to deploy readers everywhere to cover, and that's kind of hard to do.
All right. Another question. What is the depth of the scan? Can it penetrate a pallet of textbooks, or even a box of books?
So the answer is, can it penetrate? Yes. Can it penetrate well enough for the tag to respond is going to be dependent upon the tag size and going to be dependent upon the antenna and the position of the antenna to that tag. We literally are able to read a pallet, everything on a pallet as it's packed along. And books being heavy water content because it's paper-based actually lend to be a little bit more difficult, but it can be done. But we've got to set the read zone up accordingly to make sure that it works properly.
The final question is, hi, we are looking for a passive asset tracking solution for a hospital in Venezuela. Do you have any experience, Miles Technologies, in the hospital industry?
Yes, as a matter of fact, we do. We've actually implemented passive RFID tracking systems at 4 cancer treatment centers and 1 large hospital. We've got 1 large hospital that literally has 175 read points throughout its facility. It's 4 stories in height at 4 stories, and there's a couple little satellite buildings as well. So we've got some experience there.
Excellent. Well, that is all the time we have for today. Again, thank you everybody for joining us. Thank you, Tom, for sharing your expertise with all of us. And again, you've got the contact information there for both Tom and Tracy on the screen. Please always feel free to contact them. We'd be more than happy to help you out. Thanks again. Enjoy the rest of your day. Bye.